That's not surprising. But when he began to sketch the diary, did Janacek really believe that those verses were written by a self-taught farmer?
Somebody believed that it could be a folk poet, but somebody said probably it was some experienced poet. Mm-hmm. But because it wasn't discovered, the writer, so it stayed as anonymous. Mm-hmm. I think that for Janacek was most important the beauty of the poems, which are very near to folk poetry.
It's the same with the poems which Schubert set to music in Winterreise or by Wilhelm Müller. The title of the book of poems is From the Notes of a Travelling Horn Player, and again it's a sort of fiction that they're by somebody, though in fact we know who they are by.
Nobody knows in the time when the poem was published, nobody knows who was the author.
But Elena Nemtsova knows, because she's found one clue hiding behind the newspaper story. The editor's note which accompanies the poems is mentioned in a book in her own library. In the memoirs of a writer called Ojef Kalda, a contemporary of Janacek, he refers to the newspaper in a letter to a friend.
A note in the postscript, he asked the friend if he had read in Lidové noviny from the day of 17th and 21st of May, from the pen of the self-taught man. I make some escamotage, which means some what the illusionists make an illusion.
Right, yeah, like a conjuring trick, or yes.
And so he said that I was the author of the text, which Janacek set in music.
Yeah.
So the mystery of the author is clean now.
Yes. Do we know if Kalda ever heard the piece?
No, he couldn't.
He couldn't have
because
heard it.
he died 3 months before the diary was performed.
Right. And Dr. Nemtsova told me of one more strange coincidence. Ojef Kalda came from a village near the spa town of Luhačovice, where Janacek first met Camilla. It's still a spa, a place where people go to relax, lose their inhibitions, indulge in a little harmless dalliance. According to the biographers, Janacek met Camilla at the Slovatska Buda wine house. But Miloš Štědron has evidence that he first saw her a few days earlier.
Janacek a Kamila se viděli z největší pravděpodobností poprvé v hostinci, v luhačovickém hostinci u Vepřeku, kde asi to bylo tak, že Kamila Janáčka zaujala zvukově, protože ho vždycky zajímaly zajímavé hlasy a notoval si je, psal nápěvky mluví. A toto je typický nápěvek mluví a tady je poznamenáno, že to bylo večer u Vepřeku 8. července 1917 a je tady napsáno píce paní Kamila a je napsán přímo nápěvek mluví jejího hlasu.
Dear Madam, accept these few roses as a token of my unbounded esteem for you. You're so lovely in character that in your company one's spirits are lifted. You will not believe how glad I am that I've met you. happy you. All the more painful I feel my own desolation and bitter fate.
And that's how, 6 weeks later, Camilla becomes the inspiration for the first of an unbroken series of masterpieces. Janacek, back in Hugwaldy, has reinvented her as his muse.
Spíš bych to viděl z hlediska toho rituálu nápěvku mluví, protože on neustále zachycuje realitu, reaguje na realitu a vždycky si najde nějakou záminku. Tady byla permanentní záminkou ta Camilla a potom se to stávalo obsesí a řekl bych, že poslední 3-4 roky už je Camilla naprosto ve všem.
We're talking about a composer who has not had a very happy life with his wife, who has in fact divorced his wife in a rather strange ceremony earlier that year. It's not a proper divorce through the court, but it's a divorce arranged by a couple of lawyers so that Janacek and his wife live together in the same house. He pays her money, she cooks his food, but they live separate lives. And of course this is a piece about someone going off with the gypsies, someone abandoning his rather safe life for uncharted territories, and I'm sure that had an attraction for him.
Yes, gypsies. We mustn't forget that the story, and Janacek managed to convince himself it was a true story, is about a sexual liaison with a social outcast. When Czechs use the word gypsy, they don't mean something romantic and distant. Gypsies are here and now. You can see them here in Brno in a few streets near the Ring Road, and now in the 21st century. The Roma are still a significant minority group with powerful traditions, but also social problems. In Brno, they're starting to address those problems, and in the process giving the Roma their own cultural centre. It has an archive, a collection of gypsy artefacts, and there's a dedicated ethnologist, Irina Kasparova. One thing that interests me with The Diary of One Who Disappeared is whether the picture of Roma life that Janacek, or rather the poet, presents in it is at all true to life. I mean, what we're presented with is a peasant boy ploughing, a girl, a gypsy girl, flitting through the bushes at the side of the field and distracting him, and we're also given a feeling that she's more sexually liberated than the. I mean, are all these things fantastical notions of Roma life, or are they based in?
I think this is what you usually get in the literature, or even in songs, in Czech national songs as well. But I think they are. It's not possible to say they are not true, because they are true, but only partly. When Janacek was composing his music, it was about the same. We have the traditional Moravian Roma who call themselves Moravian or Czech Roma, who were settled here by the end of the 19th century and lived settled as other normal people lived in normal huts or normal houses. Most of the Moravian Roma were killed in concentration camps throughout the Second World War. So after the Second World War, we ended up with about 400 Roma who survived. So 90% of the Roma today come from Slovakia, and these were really traveling ever since they left Romania, and were living exactly this way of life you described. They would go through the villages, spend 1, 2, 3, 4 days, even a week in one spot. They would trade the things they had for sale, copper or even horses. The women would read your fortune. And they would also steal the chicken. Even my grandmother remembers, or she was telling me when she first heard that I'm going to work in the museum, she said, "Oh, I know the folk, when they were coming through to the village, my mother always shouted, oh, keep the chicken inside, don't